The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So follow along here. The Commanders on their 53-man roster have two active kickers. The 6th and 7th kickers added to the roster since March. Neither one was there yesterday. Both of them expecting their wives to have babies. But guess who was there? Jonathan Allen, presumed to be gone for the year with a torn pectoral muscle. Strange day indeed in Ashburn. We will get to that and more on the preparation for the Philadelphia Eagles for Sunday. Steve Young with some really good thoughts on quarterbacking in the NFL. The guy needs a job. He's been out of ESPN for at least a year, maybe 2 years, and still his insight is tremendous. He comes on the Dan Patrick Show from time to time, as he did yesterday, and provided some thoughts that we will get to coming up in about 20 minutes or so. Before I get to the strange kicking situation in Ashburn yesterday, Dan Quinn, who's seen it all, greeted it with a sense of humor yesterday. There is something that's troubling right now, and it involves the government shutdown, which could have a big effect on whether or not this RFK Stadium bill passes. I'm sure you're up to speed on this, that House Republicans scrapped a federal spending bill that was due to be released that included regional priorities, including the rebuilding of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and the bill that will give D.C. control of the land around RFK Stadium and then extend the lease and make it possible for the district to make a deal with the Commanders to build a new stadium there. According to what they have here in the Post today, it's now unclear whether those provisions will be part of a renegotiated pared-down spending bill that House Speaker Mike Johnson has not detailed in his plans for a new version. To avoid a government shutdown, Congress must pass a short-term spending bill before Saturday morning. And there's just misinformation being put out there by Elon Musk, who apparently has convinced Donald Trump that this is the way to go, and Trump put out that the House needs to pass a more streamlined bill, capital letters, without Democratic giveaways. But according to the story here, the RFK legislation does not include any federal funding for a stadium. In fact, it prohibits it. The provision only transfers control of the land to D.C. and allows the city to redevelop it for a host of purposes, including a sports stadium. So, they're just flexing here and creating a lot of attention. And, the way things are going with the deadline coming up tomorrow, that they have to get there by midnight tomorrow, and maybe they'll find a way to do this. But if this thing dies because of this, then we're back to square one on the stadium. We're back at this sometime next year. Maybe they address it next year, but the reality is they got to think about moving on now. And they do own the land around FedEx Field, the Commanders do, and they may look at this and go, man, we tried and we tried and we tried. We did all we could, and look at what we ran into. Do we want to do this again, where the easiest path is to just build closer to the Morgan Boulevard metro station, make it easier for people who want to commute by public transportation, and just be done with it, because dealing with this is chaotic. And I don't know enough about this to tell you which way it's going to go. But in talking to somebody who I think is really schooled on these things, he told me that he believes that Trump will be talked to by Republican leaders who will convince him that this is not the way he wants to start his administration. I hope so. Hope that's the case. And I hope that this bill passes and we'll have a clear path for the stadium to be built in D.C. It's evident that ownership wants this. The district obviously wants this. Mayor Bowser has said this many times, that this is what they want to do here. So the question is, will it be held up because of the federal red tape that they're going through right now? Keep your fingers crossed, but the countdown is on. It's 9:05 on Thursday morning, And what do we have? Roughly, it's less than 48 hours, 32 hours, something like that, to get that done. All right, from Ashburn yesterday. This is really bizarre. Nikki Jabala did a really good job of chronicling this in the Post. They have two kickers on the active roster, the 6th and 7th kickers, by the way, to come on to this team since March when they signed Brandon McManus, who they thought, okay, veteran kicker. He's been kicking for Jacksonville. We're all set. And then we find out in June that there was a civil case filed by two flight attendants who were on a flight last year with the Jaguars to London, and McManus, according to them, sexually harassed them. They did not find enough evidence to go forward with the suit, so the NFL did not issue any punishment, and I believe McManus is now kicking for the Green Bay Packers. So that began this wild walk in the desert for kickers. Ramez Ahmad came in first, followed by Riley Patterson, who, by the way, has surfaced. He's now in Atlanta. They got an injury there with Koo, their kicker, so it could be Riley Patterson who's kicking against Washington when the Falcons come here on the 28th. And then neither of those guys stuck around for the regular season. Remember, right before the start of the season, they made a trade with Cleveland. It was a conditional trade, and he had to be on the roster for 2 games, which he was not, so they didn't give up anything. But they brought in Cade York from the Browns. He was cut after the opener. Austin Seibert was signed for the following game, which he was needed because he set a team record by kicking 7 field goals in a win over the Giants. But then Seibert got hurt, so they brought in Zane Gonzalez, but he was hurt. He didn't play in New Orleans last Sunday. That meant Greg Joseph, who, by the way, had kicked for the Giants earlier this year because they had a kicking injury, which, came up in the game that they played here. So there they are with all the different kickers, and you figure, okay, you got 2 kickers on the roster. You'll have at least one available to practice yesterday as they resume practice for the Philadelphia game, and, hopefully one of them be healthy enough to kick in the game against Philadelphia. Well, they may be healthy, but both Zane Gonzalez and Greg Joseph were excused from practice yesterday because of, quote, the pending births of their children. Wow, that was a stunner. Stunning in a good way was seeing Jonathan Allen back on the practice field. And they have opened up a 21-day window, that's what they call it, so they have the option either to activate him or keep him on injured reserve for the rest of the year. But remember when he had the injury for the torn pectoral muscle, it was going back 6 weeks, something like that, and it was presumed that he was going to be out for the year. And with his contract for next year, it seemed very likely that he wasn't going to be on the roster. Well, then yesterday, there he is out on the field with Dan Quinn explaining this.
Post-surgery to where that started it to say, okay, this is something that, potentially could be there. And then you had to make the next marker. He went up to Manhattan on a checkup. And so once he was able, I would say maybe just a few weeks ago, say this could be a realistic thing. Seeing the surgeon, seeing that process go, because he looked not like a person that had this surgery. Usually you see, a lot less on one side. And so that he's built different for sure. But it was within the last month where this, trajectory was taking place. And if he had hit all the markers, then we knew this would have been the window that the docs had advised to say, if he hits all the stuff to lead up into this pressing and moving, you'd have a shot to do that. And so now, he just hit the spots, and so we'll continue down that way.
All right, so full steam ahead. Here's Allen in the locker room.
So we knew kind of early that there was going to be a good opportunity for me to come back, but again, you never know until it happens. So, every day I just worked hard with the intent of coming back, but, never really knowing for sure. So God is good, and I'm just happy to have a chance.
You can play the what-if game with Jon Allen. It was going to be a tough putt anyway, but remember how the Steelers game ended. It ended with Johnny Newton jumping off sides, which allowed the Steelers to keep control of the ball. I think it was a 4th down play, and they were able to run out the clock. If Allen is healthy, Allen's on the field, Newton is not, and Newton was among the happiest to see Allen practicing yesterday.
I was probably more happy than he was. Like I always said, that's my big brother, so having him out there was a great feeling for the D-line. He's our leader, the D-line, him and Payne. So having him out there just a new level of energy and just happiness for everybody.
Yeah, not happy the other night was Newton when he had I guess all rookies do this. They have to take the veterans out at some point in the season. And you've probably seen some of these dinner checks online. They go up to, maybe $25,000. He got off, seems like, rather light. It was under $10,000. It's a lot of money, obviously, but he did get plenty of money as a second-round draft pick. I think it's over $9 million. So $9,000 for dinner is okay. And he what was put out by one of the veterans, I forget, but he put it out on Instagram with Newton saying as he saw the bill, F that. But yesterday when asked about it, he said, that it was okay. I understand. It could have been a lot worse, that kind of thing. Tom Brady was known for really sticking it to the rookies when he played with the Patriots. He used to order $3,000 and $4,000 bottles of wine, take one sip, and leave. So I guess, Johnny Newton, all's well that ends well. He's almost $10,000 lighter in the wallet, but I'm sure he can afford it. Also from yesterday, a little bit of saltiness, I think, from Kirk Cousins as he was benched. And let me get the quotes here that he said. He was gracious first about the fact that he wasn't playing well enough and sort of deserved to be benched. He understood that. Here's what he said. He said, it's pro football. It was a standard that I have for myself and the team for me. Unfortunately, I wasn't playing up to that standard consistently enough. But he was asked whether he believed he can still start in the NFL. And he said, quote, I didn't forget how to play quarterback. Certainly turnovers were not what you want, but I didn't forget how to play. Ooh, a little bit of that. As I said yesterday, I think he's going to wind up in one of two places next year, either with San Francisco. That's assuming Kyle Shanahan is there. There are rumors that they're going to trade him to the Bears, so I think he may go where Kyle goes, or he could go with Mike O'Connell wherever he is. Well, he's in Minnesota, but more importantly, what happens with Sam Darnold? And if Sam Darnold stays in Minnesota, if he signs a new contract, he's not going there. But with J.J. McCarthy ready to step up, I could see Cousins going to Minnesota in the Marcus Mariota role next year for J.J. McCarthy. As for what Penix will bring and what we're likely to see here a week from Sunday, Penix will make his first start against the Giants this Sunday. Mel Kiper, who did all the scouting on him coming out of Washington this past year, on our morning show on Sportsmanlike yesterday, explaining what the scouting report is on Michael Penix Jr.
I thought they may have made this move a little earlier. They made it now. Some thought they wouldn't even go there. They just had a plan in place. That's kind of what they said. We have a plan for Michael Penix Jr. It's kind of to treat this like Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith, okay? To let Alex Smith, which became Kirk Cousins, to be the guy. Remember, Alex Smith led them into the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes played that final game, I believe it was at Denver, a meaningless game, but he played that final regular season game, and then it was Alex Smith's team, and then he moved on in the trade to Washington, right? That's what I thought would happen with this situation, that maybe, when they drafted Penix, I really thought Penix might be the guy, because Kirk was coming off the injury. Maybe Penix is the guy right away once they made that move, but they thought, and then it was like, okay, they're just going to redshirt him, and they're going to use it as Cousins and Alex Smith and let it go. But now they're making the move. I want to see this kid's got exciting arm talent. He really does. He's got a lot of confidence throwing the football. He'll let it rip. He'll throw it into tight windows, and he'll be really accurate. He can make the throws. The reason why he was surprised to me to go as high as he did was the durability concern. He had all those injuries at Indiana, right? But I think they just said, okay, we're not going to find a quarterback who can throw the football like this. If we're picking in the 20s, which is what they thought they would be, then we're not going to find this kind of guy. So let's get him. And now I think it was accelerated a little bit. It's been moved up a little bit from, I think, when they wanted to get him in there as a starter. It was probably next year based on their plan. But plans, hey, sometimes go awry, and that's what happened here. And they're going to try to hope they get a hot hand here that can win some games and get them into the playoffs, because they're right now on the outside looking in.
Yeah, well, they're 7-7. They're fighting for the division title. I think it's probably going to go to Tampa Bay, but they got a shot to do it, and they're going to roll the dice with a rookie. Now, Mel is, I think, 100% right when this plan was supposed to kick in for next year, and a lot of that, you look at the money. Andrew Brandt analyzed this yesterday, and he's a former front office executive with the Packers. He did their cap for 10 years, and he said, essentially, if Cousins never takes another snap for the Falcons, which he's unlikely to do, that they will have paid about $90 million to get 14 games out of him and a 7-7 record. And I thought about this. I was trying to find the exact number that some of the great quarterbacks made over the course of their careers, like, Dan Marino. And I'm guessing that $90 million is maybe double their career earnings. I know it's a different era. I know Dan Marino's been retired for about 25 years. Joe Montana, same thing. He's been out for 30 years. I get that. But just think about that. Just to go with a quarterback who is not at their level. No way Kirk Cousins is going to the Hall of Fame. They spent $90 million to do this. And while it's an incredible amount of money, I saw a story today which is really mind-blowing when you think about the Commanders going for $6 billion less than 2 years ago, year and a half ago, and people going, oh, my God, look at these numbers. The Golden State Warriors, in an NBA which is going through some problems now. We'll get to what Charles Barkley said about it yesterday, coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. The Warriors have been valued now, according to Sportico, which tracks these things. Sportico values them at $9.1 billion. This is an NBA team which is valued at $3 billion more than the Commanders. 50% more? Okay, they got Steph Curry, but he's not going to play forever. The Knicks are valued at $8.3 billion in the number one market. Lakers in the number two market, just over $8 billion. The Wizards, Ted bought the Wizards and the arena from the Poland family in 2009. He paid $550 million, I think was the number. They're worth $4 billion. The team's worth $4 billion. The average NBA team is worth $4.6 billion, a 15% rise over last year. And I know we're talking about NBA here, but just think about what NFL teams are worth. And if the Cowboys ever went up for sale, Sportico values them at $10.3 billion. That's not what they would sell for. That's like a house in a hot market. You might put the house up and wind up selling it for 30% more than your asking price. That's the way things are working, especially around here these days. So, somebody's going to want the Cowboys. That's not just an NFL franchise. That's a jewel NFL franchise. And if you run it properly, you can really, really make it America's team again. They've, even with the way that 80-plus Jerry Jones has run the team, they're still worth $10.3 billion. So, nobody has to cry for Arthur Blank when he coughs up $90 million for a quarterback that didn't work out. But it just goes to show you what the money is these days in professional sports. And a lot of it has to do with TV and streaming and all the things that are going into the broadcast rights that make it so valuable. The NFL really made a bad deal. And there's a reopener in 2029. And reports are they could double their money. And they're already getting, I think, $11 billion a year from television. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. All right, coming up, Steve Young on what he thinks of the benching of Kirk Cousins. He played a long time behind Joe Montana, but was never benched himself, but has some definite thoughts on what happened in Atlanta. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So if you used to listen to me when I work with Steve Zabin, you may remember Zabe hectoring me about the need for multiple televisions in my primary watching room. And he had 3, and I went over to his house. It was spectacular. He had a 100-inch TV in the middle, and on either side, 60-inch TVs. I mean, it was just incredible. But I told him I don't have the eyeball of a fly. It's hard for me to watch 3 things at once, and I'm okay with the remote and changing channels. However, if you look at the football schedule for Saturday, you got to start to be thinking about multiple TVs. This is the lineup, and this is going to be an interesting experiment, too, because this is college football going up against the juggernaut NFL. And I know it's college football playoff games, but the NFL is also offering you up very attractive teams and very attractive players mainly Patrick Mahomes, who could play with that bad ankle against the Texans on Saturday. There's two Saturday games, and they set this up, by the way. Not that they don't have Saturday games at this time of year, but they made sure to put these 4 teams on Saturday so that they can play them on Wednesday. Like, oh, we're giving you enough rest because you got an extra day. Never mind, you got a short week coming off this past week and having to play Saturday. But it's okay because you get Sunday off and then you get Monday and Tuesday. And, oh, you got to play on Wednesday. And for 2 of the teams, you have to play on the road. Money, money, money. The cash is flowing. But what are you going to watch here? Noon Saturday, SMU at Penn State. 1 o'clock, Kansas City's home against Houston. 4 o'clock, Clemson at Texas. So you're going to have the 2 college and pro games going on at once in that noon to like 4 window with SMU at Penn State and Houston at Kansas City. Then at 4 o'clock, Clemson at Texas. And at 4:30, the Steelers kick off in Baltimore. So you got those 2 games going on at once. It should wrap up in time so you can have singular focus on the Tennessee-Ohio State game at 8 o'clock. But the ratings are going to be very curious. I'm sure the NFL will win. The NFL should win. But will the numbers for what is really an experimental period for the NCAA in football, will they be significant enough so that they stay in this kind of window, or will they make sure that they don't go up against the NFL next year when they roll out the playoff again? That's going to be something to keep an eye on. Steve Young, don't know why he's not on ESPN anymore. I think his analysis is always spot on. He's funny. He's insightful, and I really enjoy watching him and listening to him. He was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday assessing what happened in Atlanta with the benching of Kirk Cousins for Michael Penix Jr.
They've been a little bit unconventional since they drafted Michael, so everyone didn't expect it, but in many ways, there's such a desire to get young, mobile quarterbacks. In the end, Kirk can't get those yards that are out there in the game today. Remember when they changed the rules and they made defenders, they couldn't launch their bodies anymore. They essentially made the game, the field bigger. It's like a Canadian field now. If you think about it that way, the field just got that much bigger in the NFL. And with that space, that's why all these cool plays and all this innovation, all this fun stuff, it's great. And so if you're a quarterback that can't go get those yards, especially in the big games, and I'm talking about leaving the pocket with your legs, calling plays out of the huddle like the Bills do, and Josh Allen walks into the end zone. How hard is it to throw to score in the NFL in the red zone? And the Bills just make it simple because he has this ability now to use his legs, to use his mobility. And if Kirk doesn't have that, now Michael's not the most, he's not the most mobile guy, but at least he can go get those yards. That might be what they're thinking too.
Awkward quarterback situations. Vikings with Sam Darnold. A good awkward. The Jets situation of what do? Do you want Rodgers back? And if you're a new coach coming in, the Falcons is kind of awkward. If Penix plays well, what do you do with Kirk? If he doesn't play well, it's awkward. I offer this one up. Let me start with this. The Niners quarterbacking situation with Brock Purdy coming due. Is that an awkward quarterback situation decision?
Well, it really comes down to how you see the game today and what I just described to you in the difference between Kirk Cousins and somebody that can move around, take the yards. If you don't have that ability to extend and to push, kind of from your athletic ability just to push defenses backwards, you're going to need more help. That's why Jared Goff, last week, he scrambled once and everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's like Josh Allen, but so he can do it, but it's not his game. So he actually, in the game today, because what I just described to you, you need more room. And so you need more help. And so when Josh gets it, let me say it this way. If you have a series, a 10-play series, they score a touchdown. In those 10 plays, if it's Jared Goff, you're going to have 10 plays where you have to call it out of the huddle generally and have it work all the way down the field. So that's hard to do. That's retail football. It's hard to do. If you can do it and you get really good at it, but it's just it's got the degree of difficulty. Where Josh Allen on the other side of the ball, he'll have a 10-play drive and he'll score, but 3 of the plays were off script and were easy yards. And it doesn't have to be efficient. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be timed up. And so all of a sudden, it's 70% of the time you got to play great football, or tactical or efficient football, and the Lions have to do 100%. So you go back to Brock Purdy. He's going to have to. He needs out of the huddle. That's his superpower. Call a play, run it, and then matriculate down the field and throw it into the end zone, and or run it in the end zone. So in many ways, in the game today, you would say, look, I want to make sure that I have plenty of help for Brock Purdy, plenty of help for Jared Goff, plenty of help for Kirk Cousins, and I need money to do that. And so that's where maybe the awkwardness that you're talking about.
Well, do you want to spend $60 million?
So if you're going to spend, I think that Dak Prescott, the Cowboys are going to suffer for a long time because they paid him a number that now in many ways takes from the ability to build teams to go help you for the very thing that you need. And so that's the dilemma, because everyone loves Brock and loves his game and loves his efficiency and his leadership and everything else. But we got to make sure we have the money to put the people with him to go win it. Because if the goal is Super Bowls, if the goal is winning some rank and file regular season games, maybe get to the playoffs, that's a different goal. And that might mean different. But if you're talking about, we want to go to the Super Bowl, we need people to be there to help Brock. And if he doesn't, and so that it becomes just how much is there available? And it is a zero-sum game in some ways with a salary cap. And I think I look at how Tom Brady thought about it. Look at how Patrick Mahomes thinks about it, right? He says, hey, look, I'm cool. I got my money, but I want to have plenty of money. And how many times did Tom every year say, look, I'm going to restructure I want plenty of money to get people that can come help me win Super Bowls. And so just with that mentality, it could all get worked out. If everybody says, oh no, I want every last dollar and I have to set the market, that's going to be a complicated, there's the awkwardness that you just talked about.
Well, go back to Dallas. Jerry Jones, everybody lauds him as a great businessman. He has to know what he's doing to the franchise by giving Dak Prescott those numbers.
Yeah, and come on, man, for 30 years. I mean, he has not empowered anyone to walk in the locker room and fire anybody. And so without that power, a coach in the NFL is neutered. And you think about why the Cowboys never reached their potential for 30 years now. Why? Because they're not empowered. So don't tell me now that Jerry made a mistake by paying back. Like you could see that he waited and waited, got desperate right at the end. It's like, okay, let's capitulate. The season's starting. Pay him. Well, okay. But now what have we done? We've overcorrected for something that we should have kind of held the line on. And so to me, holding accountability in the Cowboy system, remember, I've always said, there's America's team and there's something about the team that they show up and they're famous. And I said before, you should take the stars off the helmet and you have to win 10 games to get 1 star. And you have to win a playoff game to get the other star. And now you've earned it yourself. You're not special. You're not, and I don't know. There's something really missing with the Cowboys, and it's been missing for a long time. Number one, get a coach that can walk into the locker room and fire somebody without asking Jerry. That's got to happen yesterday.
Well, it's not going to happen probably until Jerry passes away. Reality. I mean, this is the way Jerry wants to run the team. He wants to win a Super Bowl with Jerry in charge of everything. Doesn't look like it's going to happen, but he owns the team. He's raised the value of the franchise to be the highest of any team at $10 billion. And he's also raised the money for a lot of people in the NFL as well. So Jerry's going to do what Jerry does. Second part of the Steve Young conversation, how he analyzes what Josh Allen is doing on his way, it appears, to winning the MVP for the Buffalo Bills, and the question that Dan asked him and how he answered it.
Josh Allen seems to have figured it out.
No, I would go the other way. I think the Bills have figured it out. Because Josh, for a number of years, had to play that Superman role over and over and over again. Because, again, the game has dramatically changed for offensive players to go take the space. He would go try to do it because he wasn't getting the help. Now, all of a sudden, he's getting the running help. He's got offensive line help. He's got innovative play calling, which is much more interesting and cool. And now he doesn't have to be Superman every play. And what's funny about it, the second you take that away, where it's not this burden that he has to kind of do it every play and go do something crazy, and all of a sudden, the more that we get of Josh Allen, that when he does do it, it's like, oh, it's just knifing. It's just, complete capitulation from the defense. They just crushes them. So I would say that the Bills came to Josh. Mm-hmm. Now he's gotten better. His sophisticated passing has gotten better. Like, it's all honed. But I think the Bills met Josh at who he could be, just like the Chiefs meet where Patrick is, and where every team needs. That's why I say this for Lamar Jackson. Meet him where he is, and they're trying to change the offense and make it less of the most sophisticated running game in America, and build a sophisticated passing game. I think they're trying, and at times it's amazing. But now, obviously, they got to do it in the playoffs.
That's Hall of Famer Steve Young on the Dan Patrick Show. So interesting analysis there on Josh Allen. And he's been saying for years that the way the game is played today, that you really have to run. You have to be able to move. And maybe that's the demise of Kirk Cousins here. Cousins could move. Now he seems immobile. And the Achilles tendon tear, what we're seeing with him and what we're seeing with Aaron Rodgers, that's a tough injury to come back from at any age. And the fact that Rodgers is 40 and Kirk's in his mid-30s, it just doesn't happen anymore. And I think a lot of teams were done a disservice by Tom Brady playing as well as he did until age 45. Now, he was obsessive about his health. He also was probably blessed with great genetics in this regard, that he could stay at that level for as long as he did. But a lot of teams are looking at him and saying, well, he played until he was 45. Maybe we can take one of these other guys and stretch them out for a while. Now, as they say, Father Time is undefeated, and it seems to have caught up with Kirk Cousins. It seems to be catching up with Aaron Rodgers and Steve Young, whose game was perfect for today's game, probably came along too soon. Not that he didn't have great success. Not that he didn't win a Super Bowl and in another era would have gotten himself out of the San Francisco situation where he had to sit behind Joe Montana for a couple of years, but also that he showed the way the game could be played. And another thing he talked about, I didn't play this, but he talked about left-handed quarterbacks. And he said the game is set up for right-handers. That's why you rarely see left-handed quarterbacks. You have Tua Tagovailoa, obviously, Michael Vick, left-handed. There have been left-handed quarterbacks who've come along and have had success. But he said you have to kind of redo everything you do offensively because it's all set up for right-handers, And you think about that, it's like, you ever see a left-handed catcher? No, it just doesn't work. Not that you couldn't have a left-handed catcher. Not somebody left-handed couldn't play the position. But what he's saying is the way football is set up, it's for right-handers. But he said when he went to play for Bill Walsh said, we'll figure out how to make it an advantage. And obviously he did. Coming up next hour, some fun and games in Ashburn yesterday. Mikey Sanderstill singing happy birthday to Jaden Daniels, and also what Charles Barkley says about the state of the NBA. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. There are a few things more entertaining than listening to Charles Barkley negotiate his contract publicly. And he went through that exercise yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. We will get to that coming up in about 20 minutes. Doug Gottlieb, who thinks he's such a great basketball coach that he can do a national radio show at the same time, suffered his 8th straight loss yesterday against the Division II team, and he looks like a fool. We'll get to that story coming up later this hour, and of course, lots of stuff from Ashburn yesterday. Wednesday's the big media day out there. Dan Quinn talks, Jaden Daniels talks, the locker room is open, and they are getting ready for the stretch run. It's, it's fun this time of year when you have a team that's pretty good. We haven't had much of this in December over the last quarter of a century, but back in the day, back in the 80s when they were gearing up for the playoffs, at that time, it was all about getting the home field. Like, get that first-round bye. Get the home field advantage. Can they do it? If they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, they got to have home field advantage. Well, things are a little different now. The bar is a little bit lower. It's getting into the playoffs, but you want to get the best seeding possible. And, they got a chance now to win 11 games. I know we got an extra game with 17, but 11 games, every team in the league, every single team, 31 others, they have all won 11 games since the last time Washington had an 11-game winner. And you have to go back to the 1991 season, the last time that they went to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. In fact, it's the last time that they went to the NFC Championship game. Okay, so the bar's a lot lower, and now they have an opportunity here in the stretch run. A lot of injuries, but good to see Jonathan Allen back on the practice field yesterday. We'll get to that. But there was fun in games as Jaden Daniels opened up his news conference yesterday. Who walks in the door with the cake but rookie Mikey Sansestrill?
Happy birthday, QB1. Happy birthday, best rookie in America. Happy birthday, Jaden Daniels. Happy birthday, bro. Appreciate you, bro. Best QB in America, man. Thanks, man. You're the guy.
Yeah, best QB in America. Dapping him up. And a big smile on the face of Daniels. Blew out the candle, the whole thing. He's 24 years old. And good for Scott Abraham of ABC7 for doing the post game with Sansestrill on the singing of Happy Birthday.
They asked me last week if I wanted to do it, and I had no problem with it at all. So I've been practicing the Happy Birthday song for a week. I kind of put my own twist on it today, but it's been a long week of preparation for today's birthday surprise.
And that was a true surprise for Jaden? He didn't know that this was coming?
Nah, he didn't know. It almost got spoiled because he saw me walking over there, so he was like, he said something to me. He was like, yeah, I see you, Mikey. I don't know if he assumed I was going to do media or something. And I'm like, dang, he just saw me walking over here. And they were like, I don't think he'll know that you're surprising him or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, and it worked. Everybody had a good time with that. This comes up every few weeks at the Dan Quinn news conferences, kind of a performance check on Jaden Daniels, the various, parts of the season, where he is, how he's getting there. And this was yesterday, as with 3 games to go. The question is, having played now 14, at least started 14 games, where is he now in his progression, and what have you seen in development through more than 3 quarters now of his rookie year?
One of the things that we've worked really hard on is remaining a passer inside of the pocket. He's got legs to move, and so for him, remaining a passer longer, the guys, stay in coverage longer, the receivers down the field working. So I think that part of the game, there's been improvement, and I would say we're still progressing in that spot. He came in with a really rock-solid background, so for me it's the things that don't show up on the stat sheet. It's checking to the right play, it's getting to the right protection, it's taking care of the football with great decisions. So for us to be, I don't know, maybe we're +4 or +5, sitting at this part of the year with a quarterback who hasn't done it before, I think that says a lot to, his ability to make good decisions. And I don't want to call it underrated, but it's a big deal.
Yeah, he's not underrated, because everybody's noticing this, and he does seem to be the favorite now for Rookie of the Year. USA Today has a big story about Jaden Daniels, and they've got quotes from a variety of people. And I know I get backlash on Twitter when I do this, but I'm sorry. When I see something like this, I got to point it out. Robert Griffin III, particularly this year. Now, some of it may be due to new ownership. I don't know. Remember, he was going to write this book that was going to blow the lid off the organization and talk about the sexual harassment that took place. And then his wife said, no, it was how he was sexually harassed. I mean, it was crazy. And then the book never got off the ground. He was going to write it with Gary Myers. And I've talked to Gary Myers about it. And Gary has said that, yeah, there was some meat there. There was definitely substance for a book, and it's all sitting on his computer right now. But it's not going to be released. Robert Griffin III decided not to. Now, the timing was interesting because he was then working for ESPN. And I guess, somebody from ESPN, I'm guessing this, said to him, this is probably not a great career move for you, to release this. But now that he's out of ESPN, he's trying to get as much attention for himself as he can. He's going to be, and I guess ESPN had to approve this, he's going to be part of this Netflix coverage on Christmas Day. They got like 20 people involved in the broadcast. I'm guessing he's going to be the one that shows up in a Santa suit because he likes that kind of attention. And you remember when he was the legend a few weeks ago for the Cowboy game, and he showed up wearing this burnt orange suit and a cowboy hat, and he went through this big thing where he waved the flag and he stomped on the hat. You know, he's interested in RG3 getting attention. So in doing this story, the reporter talked to a lot of people, including Robert Griffin III, who I guess has struck up a friendship with Jayden Daniels, and it goes back to when RG3 called 3 of his college games at LSU and has stayed in touch with him. He didn't know he was going to go to Washington, but he saw somebody that was playing in his style, the same style that Griffin did. They're now both Heisman Trophy winners, so they could be at the Heisman House. But this made me go, oh, come on. Here's what Griffin said about his relationship with Jayden Daniels. Quote, "He doesn't need me. I never want people to feel like these guys need someone, but to be able to use that experience to help him navigate some of the things that affected you and your career." He said, I think that's valuable to give back. That's what I try to do. I try to approach it, but back then I didn't know what I know now. And I can use what I know now to help the next generation. You know, if I was somebody close to Jayden Daniels or somebody in the organization, maybe even his coach, you know, maybe even Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator who he works most closely with, I would say to him, it's okay for you and RG3 to be friends, but let's recognize who he was and who you are. And RG3 was always about himself, always about making it about himself. And if you listen to the coaching staff, he wasn't a big film guy. You know, he relied a lot on his great athletic ability, the videos he would do in the offseason about how hard he's working out and how hard he's running and how many pull-ups he could do and all. Jayden Daniels is all about getting into the tape study. It's not film anymore. Tape study at 5:30 in the morning, working with other players, totally humble in everything he does. And, you know, you can have RG3 talk to you, and you could pin some of RG3's troubles on the ownership. It was miserable ownership with Dan Snyder, but he created some of the problem himself, nuzzling up to Snyder, undermining Mike Shanahan, who has proven with what's happened in the NFL now that he had one of the great coaching staffs put together of all time. I mean, you got guys who are winning Super Bowls and Sean McVay and competing for him with his son and others, and look at what's happening in Green Bay. I mean, Green Bay was one of his assistants too, and in Minnesota, those guys were all here. Oh, Coach Mike McDaniel, who's done a good job in Miami despite all the injury issues there. They were all here. And you chose to use the owner to undermine Mike Shanahan. That's what you did. And so, I would not want Jayden Daniels to be listening to Robert Griffin III. And RG3 was very insecure. You could say maybe for a reason. I don't know. But he shouldn't have been. They had Kirk Cousins in the 4th round, and he didn't like that. And he should have recognized they gave up the most ever to move up 4 spots in the draft to take him. 2 number 1s and a 2. They swapped 1s. They gave up another number 1 and a 2 with the Rams to move up to take him. So it was his job. He was really going to have to be awful to lose that job. And for him to try this fake humbleness that he likes to do, and he did this too with Lamar Jackson. He actually said that the rookie year that he had, and it was spectacular, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 850 yards rushing. They won the last 7 games of the year. He was great. But he said it was a bigger thrill to help mentor Lamar Jackson to become a franchise quarterback. Please. So stop with the false modesty about whatever you're doing with Jayden Daniels. And if you're somebody in the organization, say, hey, Jayden, you and RG3, you could be chums, but, don't let him don't let him coach you here. Let us coach you. That's the way that I would look at that. So that was Quinn yesterday on Daniels. This is something else from Quinn yesterday, and I've never really heard it described this way, but it makes total sense. When you talk about depth on your team, yes, it's good to have good players behind starters. The salary cap prohibits it in a large way, but they had room this year, and I think you could say Adam Peters is probably going to win Executive of the Year. Did a great job of bringing in guys who can step in and play, and they've had some injuries. I don't think they've been hit necessarily harder than other teams, but they're playing without some key players like Austin Eckler and Noah Brown, although Noah Brown was a pickup just before the season started as he was cut by Houston. But they're playing without weapons now, and the fact that guys have been able to step in and play, I think, is a credit to what they have behind them and also how they've been coached. And this was Quinn yesterday explaining how he has been able to develop depth with this team.
Going into it, you want to have a big, deep crew that you have to take people out at times in practice. You may have even seen that at times in a competitive period. I learned early on you take some people out into those moments just to see the next player respond. It's a 2-minute drill, and Jeremy is out. It's a 2-minute drill, and you take Wagner out, take the starting center out to create some diversion and adversity in that. So when those times do come, that player's been in those environments as often as you can. From the coaching side, it's really important that every player in the room has the responsibility for the game day. You've heard us talk a lot about development, so it would be unfair to say, just for example, because Chick is sitting here, if he was in the running back room, say, okay, the other 3 are ready, but he'll get there eventually. That would be irresponsible because we're not developing him, not just the skills, but like the football acumen to go. So each player in the game plan, like they're responsible for that for the week, even if they're unlikely to play in that game. You just don't know when the guy gets sick, something happens at a practice, and the next person has to be available. So I think it's important that like we said, we look at this as like not a 53 or even a 48-man roster, but 65 where it's everybody's can be into that. And that's why at practice all of the players play, not just on you've seen the scout teams holding up cards. So I think that's an important piece to this. If you really want a competitive team, the pressure has to be on everyone to deliver. You don't know who could win the game for you. And so you have to put that pressure on them to get that done.
Yeah, I never really heard it explained that way, but that makes total sense. That during practice, you don't anticipate that a player will necessarily get hurt, but if he does, you're prepared to do that, and you actually practice that. You practice putting in a backup with the starters. You always hear, like, the ones go against the scout team, whether it's offense or defense, but he's mixing it up here, and it also helps to keep people engaged. And this is one of the things that really surprised me when I became a reporter and started to cover practices for NFL teams. This goes back to the early 80s when I was covering the Dallas Cowboys, and they'd let you watch some of practice. When I was in high school, I thought, well, we seem to spend a lot of time here, when they're practicing, especially in the days where I was sitting on the bench, which was kind of most of high school, that while the ones were going, you were told you can't sit on your helmet, you can't sit on your rear end, you have to take one knee. But we spent a lot of time doing that and just kind of watching. And I thought, well, in the pros, it's, everybody's engaged. No, not really. A lot of teams, you watch practice, there's guys just, standing there or sitting there, and they can sit on their helmets. In fact, when John Madden coached the Raiders, he used to let them sit on their helmets and smoke. He's Fred Biletnikoff sitting on his helmet smoking a cigarette. And so, I thought that's kind of odd. Well, I guess that's not the way Dan Quinn does it, and makes total sense. Got guys ready to go. And back now ready to go after missing some games here and there with injuries. Brian Robinson sounding totally juiced now to play the Eagles on Sunday.
Vision games are fun. They know us. We know them. We see them 2 times a year. Obviously they want to beat us. We need to beat them. And we, it's fun. It's exciting, to be able to, have these moments, these experiences to play in these games, and excited for the next one.
How exciting is it to be in this position for a playoff push with 3 games left of the season, B-Rob?
Oh, it's great. It's a great feeling to know what we're fighting for, and just easily motivate us, to just want to be on top of our game so that we can be just fully equipped for everything on the back end of the season.
Hey, today's Jaden's birthday, and he got asked to think about how much his life has changed in a year. Have you thought about this late in the season compared to what it felt like in this locker room this time last year?
Well, the energy is definitely different. Around this time last year it was very, very bad. So it's great to see, just the change and what a year can make, and some good to build off of.
If you chronicle the 3 years that Brian Robinson has been here, it's really fascinating. Just before his rookie year, he got shot in that carjacking. Miracle of miracles. The bullet didn't penetrate ligament or bone in his knee, and he came back and he played. He only missed 4 games and was really, really good as a rookie. And then his second year, they bring in Eric Bieniemy, who had been a running back in the NFL, and Bieniemy, for whatever reason, decided that Sam Howell should throw on every play, and they underutilized him tremendously. Now they got a coaching staff that knows how to use him. He's been hurt some, but after those first 2 miserable years where he's got to come back from a gunshot wound and then a coach who doesn't use him properly, he's now a big part of an offense that is leading the way for a playoffs, and maybe can even win a playoff game. I mean, that's he came from a great program. He's shopping at the Alabama store is never a bad idea, and he had great success there, great coaching with Nick Saban, et cetera, et cetera. Real fine for them, I think. It was a second-round pick, and he's been absolutely great for them. And to have him healthy and ready to go at this time of year is really big for them. All right, coming up, Doug Gottlieb, who is still a radio host and a college basketball coach. The radio's subjective. You can decide whether or not he's good at that. It's objective to look at a team that has lost 8 straight games and is 2-11 as a bad team. He's got a bad team that he's coaching, and you got to blame some of it on him. And at least in my opinion, and I'll tell you why, you got to blame some of it on the fact that he still does a radio show. And boy, did he embarrass himself yesterday. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram is up at 11 o'clock, and I'm sure he'll have plenty to talk about with what happened in Ashburn yesterday. Jonathan Allen back on the field. Both kickers were with their wives who are about to give birth. They've had 7 different kickers this year. Absolutely amazing. And the continuing development of Jaden Daniels and what Dan Quinn said about that yesterday. Bram's at 11. Meantime, Doug Gottlieb. I don't know Doug Gottlieb. I've had him on the radio a few times. I may have come across him during the years I was at ESPN, but don't know him at all. I do know that he was essentially kicked out of Notre Dame for stealing a credit card. He wound up at Oklahoma State, played point guard for Eddie Sutton on a team that got to the Final Four, played some in Europe, and has become a successful radio and television host, and is now doing a show on Fox Sports Radio. Since he played college basketball, loves basketball, coached his kids' youth teams. He also had some experience as an assistant coach for Bruce Pearl in the Maccabi games, serving as the head coach, though, in 2017. So he does have head coaching experience, at least in that. But never been a head coach in college, for sure. And he was hired at Wisconsin Green Bay. Now, the coach who left Wisconsin Green Bay, he wasn't fired. He left behind not a mess of a program. So this wasn't like, oh, my God, what are we going to do here? We're nowhere, and we're just going to have to reach out and hire somebody and hope that there's a spark. His name is Sundance Wicks. He was 18-14 last year. Was only there for a year, but impressed Wyoming enough to become their head coach. So Wicks is gone, and Gottlieb steps in. And, you would think that someone at his stage of the game, I think he's in his 50s now, would look at this as a coaching opportunity and a career change. And in some ways it is. But Gottlieb said, no, I'm going to keep my radio show. It's an afternoon radio show. And I'm going to coach the basketball team. And they said, well, what about practice? He said, well, the head coach sets the practice time, so I'll just schedule it around my radio show. Okay. So I guess I know Wisconsin Green Bay was willing to go along with this because he didn't hide it. And so he's now both a radio host and a college basketball coach for a team that's apparently a lot worse than the team last year that lost only 14 games all season. And here we are in mid-December, and his team is now 2-11. And last week, after they lost at home to Milwaukee, I guess Wisconsin-Milwaukee, he said this about the schedule for his team.
Part of the reason I want to play better teams is like, it's 2 degrees outside, it's snowing. Like, I don't really like the idea of you coming in here and like, I always thought, like, what do we learn playing a game where we win by 20? But there's a methodology to it. And I'm going to have to adjust moving forward.
Nobody you was the team he played yesterday, Michigan Tech, a Division II team. And at the half, his Wisconsin Green Bay team led by 13 points. But Michigan Tech came back and they won the game 72-70. The 8th straight defeat that Doug Gottlieb's team took. He went on social media about the backlash of this, and he said, done with this crap. We're scheduled up, including Michigan Tech. Nowhere ever have I been critical of anyone on our schedule. Now back to work. Well, you called them nobody you. I think that's being critical. Speaking to the media after the game, he was asked about his off-court activities and the focus on that. He got into a little back and forth with Adam Schefter about this earlier this week. And he said, whatever I'm going to do is going to draw a lot of attention. I have I have a certain tone sometimes to the way I speak and especially the way I tweet, which can upset people. I promise you, even though it's in the negative now, it'll be positive soon. Keep all the receipts, and we'll just keep doing our job. I'm as dedicated to this job as any human being has ever been, and I'm going to see it through until we win the Horizon League championship. This is my dream job. I will not fall short of the 100% effort that's required. No, it's not a 100% effort. And I'm going to go back here. This goes all the way back to 2008. And this was year one of Jim Zorn. This is after Joe Gibbs had retired the second time. And Vinny Serrato, who was then the head of player personnel for the Redskins. I don't think he had the title of general manager. But Vinny decided that he was going to do a radio show because it was fairly new then. The station that I was working for, 980, had been purchased by Dan Snyder in a move. He tried to start his own thing. It was called Triple X, and he had 3 really bad signals, and they were going nowhere. So Vinny decided that the man who was and he's one of the best programming people I've ever worked with, Bruce Gilbert. He's brilliant in terms of sports radio programming. I worked with him at ESPN and at 980. And they had purchased 980 to kind of save what they were doing. 980 was struggling, so they thought they'll own that, and they absorbed us. And to Bruce's credit, they allowed Zabe and I to be critical of the team, and that was fine. But Vinny decided that he was going to do a radio show in the morning at 10 o'clock after Mike and Mike, and so I said, and I was going by what Bruce Gilbert preached about preparing for a show. He said, for every hour you're on the air, you need to do an hour of preparation. So this was a 2-hour show twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. Now, I was told Vinny initially wanted to do it 5 days a week, even though he was the head of player personnel for the team during the season, where you have to make moves, you have to pick up people off the waiver wire, you have to fill in for injured players. There's work to be done during the season. But he decided it was okay for him to do a 2-hour radio show Mondays and Fridays. And if I went by Bruce's formula for preparation, that would mean 8 hours a week of prep and being on the radio. And I said, well, if the Redskins don't win the Super Bowl, Vinny is subject to criticism because he's not spending all of his time being focused on the football team. I mean, you hear about coaching. These guys work unbelievable hours. They're working round the clock pretty much on the team, and you would think the one who's in charge of providing players would be more focused. No, Vinny's going to do this. So, I was quoted in the paper for that, and they went to Bruce about that, and Bruce said, what they said was totally in line. I'm glad he supported us. And so that was the year that they started off 6-2 with Jim Zorn, and Vinny was taking calls, and everything was hunky-dory, and then they started to lose, and the callers started to attack him, so he stopped taking calls. But it was pretty clear to me that his focus couldn't be 100% on the football team if he was doing a twice-a-week radio show for 2 hours. 4 hours on the air during the week, at least if he's preparing properly, another 4 hours of preparation. How many hours can you devote to what is a fun activity, not your job at all? And I look at this and I say, if I'm Wisconsin Green Bay, I got to go to him and I say, it's fine if you're 11-2, but you're 2-11. You're 2-11 and you're doing this radio show. Now, curiously, and we'll see where the follow-up goes with this, Gottlieb was absent from his radio show yesterday, even though the game concluded early enough for him to do it. I believe he goes on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the game was played at something like 11 o'clock or noon or whatever it was. It was over in time for him to do the show. But no, he couldn't do it because of whatever, and maybe it was because they lost the game. And, what I do for a living, it's not the hardest job. I understand that. And people look at it and they go, well, how tough can that be? I know sports. I can sit around all day and talk sports. Yeah. Okay. Well, try doing it. Try and talk for 10 minutes by yourself and be interesting. And I'm not saying that anybody's going to give me a Marconi, but the fact of the matter is I've been doing this a long time. I know how to properly prepare to do a show, and it doesn't take 5 minutes to do it. And I can't do it during the course of my day. Now, there's some, you may hear them on the radio, and you can decide for yourself, but you can tell when somebody is pretty much mailing it in. I don't do that. And I don't think Doug Gottlieb does that on the radio either. And the fact that he has a national show indicates he must be pretty good at this. And from what I understand, he got a bigger offer to leave ESPN. I don't think he was released by ESPN. He got a bigger offer to go to Fox. He took it. He did that as his primary job for many, many years, maybe 10 to 15 years, something like that. And now he's decided that he can take on a college basketball coaching job, Division I. And all you hear about these guys is the amount of hours that they work. It's not the way it is, maybe in the NFL and how Joe Gibbs did it when he slept on the couch and, watched film until 3 o'clock in the morning. But it's a full-time job. And now more than ever in coaching basketball, you're working all the time because you're not only recruiting for the next year or looking for NIL money or transfers or everything. You're recruiting your own roster to stay. The guys you want to be on your team. Now, if they're 2-11, I don't know how many he wants to keep. But the hubris of this guy to say, yeah, we need to change the schedule, need some tougher teams instead of nobody you that we can beat by 20, and they play nobody you, and they lose the game, their 8th straight defeat to drop to 2-11, and he's saying, oh, I'm committed to this 100%. Nobody's more into their job than I am. No, you're not. You're spreading yourself too thin, and that's why you got this problem. And I haven't heard the radio show. I've never really listened to him other than some sound bites, but I got to imagine that's suffering too. Good luck, Doug Gottlieb. Good luck to you. Bram is coming up next. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.